Hello, everybody. Once again, I am Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorbala Chan, Less Than Guru, and today will be the first of hopefully a series of weekly, unless something crazy happens, videos Torg Tuesdays. So I will be talking about Torg because I am of the opinion, and maybe it's a false opinion, but I'm of an opinion that most people who are watching this have something to do or know me through Torg reasons. So that's why I'm doing that. Toward Tuesdays, I will do other content. I probably won't do D&D content specifically. I'll do how I use D&D content for other things unless I actually do reviews or I'm talking about specific scenarios. So, having said that, I wish to say that tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, 4 Pacific, I will be game mastering Blood on the Blasted Lands with organized play people on the Roll, Hit, Die Twitch channel, and then it will be posted to the Roll, Hit, Die YouTube channel. And on YouTube, it's a little different. It is roll, comma, and then no space, hit, comma, but then a space, die. So roll, comma, hit, comma, space, die. So you can check out the content there. There's already one episode. Tomorrow will be the second episode. I was very pleasantly happy last session, so I was very happy that it was a fun event for me, and apparently it was a fun event for the players. So I hope that continues. So today on Torg Tuesdays, I want to talk about mega adventures. I want to talk about the different Torg Eternity mega adventures and things that I like and dislike, and are things to make it your own, because that's always my mantra. If you watch these series, probably in the future you will see it. Make it your own. You don't have to follow the rules. You don't have to follow the adventure step by step. Make it your own. And I've done that with any game, Old Torg, D&D, Palladium, anything out there. If you watch my Palladium Nintir Vale playthroughs with my every other Sunday group, you'll see that I don't use a lot of Palladium rules, that they're doing other adventures. It's set in the D&D 4th edition Nintir Valley. So make it, change it, do whatever. But I wanted to talk about the mega adventures. So the first one is going to be the God Box from the Living Land. This thing I had to change a lot because in my world I have the Living Land, I have the Lost Land, which is based off of the Land Below and Land Above of Old Torg, which in my realm takes place in Central Africa, and then I have Azteca Empire in Mexico and down Central America. So this took place in all three, and I had to change things. I had to take what the God Box is actually used for, and change that. I cut out a whole act, not because I thought the act was bad. I just thought it was repetitive. I thought if I took that out, then I could use it later as a standalone act. And a lot of people, they complain, oh, I put my players through this, and then they did the same thing, and they did this, and they did the same thing, and then they did this, and then they did the same thing, and do that. Cut it out. There's nothing here that says you have to do all 7 acts. You just skip it. If there's a teleport and it takes you from A to B, and then and then you do some stuff in B, and then you take another teleport to C, just have that A teleport hit the C and skip the B if you think that it's repetitious, and use it elsewhere. That's what I'm going to do at some point. I'll probably bring that act in somewhere else and just use it. But the game, people at the end, my players liked it. I liked it. I thought it went well. They thought it went well. So that was the first one. The second one was Fires of Ra. And again, this is something that I changed, made my own. And I changed it in one major way, in one way that I'm not sure how it necessarily was intended, but I did it in a different way, and I was happy with my group. So the first thing is the first 2 acts of this can be standalone. And that's what I did with it. My players have gone through the first 2 acts of this. Basically, in another one that I'm going to talk about, Relics of Power, there are areas where there is waiting times. And they had finished something off in the Nile Empire, and they had to wait some time. So I threw the first two acts of them at them for this. And then at some point in time, either them or another group will do the other acts of this. So you can split things that don't necessarily need to be split if they have good stopping points. And I thought acts 1 and 2 went very well together. It's not to say that 3 through 7 didn't go well with 1 and 2, but there was a definitive little stop, and I wanted to continue on with Relics of Power, and I did that. So you can do that. The other thing is there is a puzzle in here, and it's a pretty cool puzzle, and it's a very old school, in my opinion, puzzle where there is hieroglyphics, and if the players could figure out the way to go, then it like was a path, we'll say. I don't want to necessarily spoil things, but there's a puzzle in the second act of this book, and I really, really liked it. And I was doing Roll20, and I actually got a map, not the one in here, because this one is kind of a three-dimensional third-person type view, and I wanted a flat map. But I like to make things my own, so I grabbed some maps and I stitched them together, and then I got some JPEGs of hieroglyphics, and I put all the orders, and then I cut out a piece of the picture in here, and I kind of put that on it, and I said, "Tell me how you walk," and I gave them no help, and they didn't have alertness cards or ID cards or anything like that in their hands. And they were like, "Oh, we want to put our evidence analysis. Oh, we want to do our find." I was like, "No, you figure it out. You figure it out." To me, that's very old school. I don't think it's adversarial. A lot of people might think that, oh, you're being a mean game master, you're being adversarial. But coming, being 47, going to be 48 this year, coming from an old school, and pretty much everybody in that group being old school and used to the times where you characters didn't have skills or had less skills, and you had to come up with ways to solve. Sometimes that's very fun, and that's some of the stuff that I personally liked, and that's one of the mentalities of old school I like, is me as a player solving something with this brain matter, this gray matter inside of this little skull cap, instead of just a die roll. And it was really cool watching the players go, "Oh, okay, now we'll do this. We thought we were going to roll and get some clues and just do it, but now we're going to think about it." And one of the players made one mistake, one little misstep, literal, stepped in a wrong square, I guess you could say, and a thing happened. Nobody died, and another player was like, "Hold on, I got this," and led that player through it, and then they were able to kind of get everybody else through it. And it didn't take much longer after that. Basically, the first player got a few places right and then misunderstood a clue, and the other player realized it, and then they went through. And that's something that I always think is cool when you have that player. The player is one. Yes, their character is one because the players are controlling the characters, but the players, without extra hints, without extra things, were able to solve something that wasn't just oh, I have an idea card. Oh, I have an alertness card. Oh, I got find or evidence analysis. It was you you figure it out. You're smart players. You kind of figure this out, and that's kind of something that some people, like I said, might consider that adversarial. I don't. I think it's just sometimes the players need to figure stuff out because they're role playing. And in my opinion, part of role playing is your head is in the body of a fictional character and you're the one controlling them. So sometimes you need to figure out what's going on. So that's just my thing. You could do it by a find or a evidence or even a DSR if you wanted to do it as a DSR. But honestly, I thought all the clues were here and my players put it together quite fast. I was very pleasantly surprised by how, even before that misstep, they figured it out. The misstep was really just a misstep. He went one way instead of another way, and then the other player jumped in and guided everybody through it. So that's what I'll have to say about this. This is a good one that if you wanted to just do a couple acts, do something else, and come back. You can do that with this. So that is a good. I can't say very much about Revenge of the Caridon because I haven't played it. This will be something that I believe it actually has Tolan Trankard in it that I would have to figure out how I would do this because she doesn't exist in my Paraverse. So that's something that I'd have to figure out, but I'm not quite. Um, I haven't played it. I've read some of it. Basically, I gave players of my second group a choice of going to Isle or Cyber Papacy. They chose Cyber Papacy. So they were going to either go here or here, and they went here. So now I'll talk about Unhallowed Data. Unhallowed Data is a really cool thing. I can see where some people might say it's linear because you are going from A point to B point to C point. But the way that you do things can be very, very different. Hold on, I gotta. Sorry about that. I paused because my phone was ringing and I was pretty sure it was going to be a scam or something. I just didn't want to listen to it. So I was right. It was a scam. Scammer trying to say that they were an officer from the IRS and I had some bad stuff against me and I had all back, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. So talking about this, so some people it is like a point A to point B to point C, but my group went completely different than how I think other people would have gone. They in this game you kind of you can set yourselves up as being agents of the cyber papacy, special secret agents or special agents. I think they're called like special envoys. I think is the term, and they not just used it, but they've kind of went along with it as in certain spaces they probably help the cyber papacy in a way, in a good way actually, because of some bad stuff that certain cyber papists are doing that are kind of bad for everybody. It's bad for the cyber papacy and bad for the Storm Knights. There's been times where they've been given a choice. Do you go after bad guy A or bad guy B? And probably the best thing would have been to go after bad guy A, but they had a vendetta against bad guy B at that time, so they went that way. It became a reoccurring, I guess, joke that every town that they left burning and kind of fleeing until the very last town that they left. And there's a scene in here that is very interesting that I took a little bit differently than how it's written because make it your own. Basically, at one point, almost everybody that they had talked to in this game had that they in some way trusted or wanted to trust came back and screwed them. And there's a scene where that is going to happen again. And the party actually was very hesitant on making contact. They were in the jungles of the Amazon, and they see this group um, of people coming, and a couple of people are like, "Oh, let's introduce, let's say hi and introduce ourselves." And the rest of the party was like adamantly, "No, we are not doing that. We are just hiding. We're letting them walk by because everybody that we introduced ourselves to, everybody who we're going to contact so far has turned on us in some way." And so this was a potential one of those situations. But a couple of them, the two, they decided that they would go out and everybody else would hide and they would present themselves and see how it went. And it kind of started to go good. So then they motioned everybody else out and everybody else came and they talked with this group of NPCs and they parted ways amicably and they were happy about it. And they were like, wow, this was one time we got through this thing and we didn't get screwed. And then the way it's set up in here is they will get screwed. But I decided to change things because I felt that my players actually were right. I had it all planned in my mind that yes, this was going to happen, but then it was brought up as they were talking to themselves, and I didn't have any input. I just let them talk. That this was another potential them getting screwed by trying to be nice to people. It happened many, many times in the past. So I decided to actually not have that happen. So they're in the middle of the time where that could happen, but I'm not going to have that happen. Basically because it's true, and I don't want to set that precedent of every single time you try to be nice with somebody, they end up screwing you. So that's something to possibly keep in mind. You can change things, you can change plots, and you can change them willy-nilly as a game master. And in my opinion, that doesn't take away player agencies if it hasn't come up in the game yet. If they hadn't got to a point, or if they had got to a point where they realized that this guy was actually going to betray them, and they pieced all the clues, say all these clues together, and then I just changed it willy-nilly, yes, I can understand how that would be against the players. But they weren't aware of anything, and I just went with it. And I do that a lot of times. Sometimes I will go with it, and um, it doesn't mean that I'm bad. It doesn't mean that this is bad. It just means I'm adaptable and I make it my own. And that is something that I encourage game masters to do. You don't always have to go strictly by the book. We have one more. Basically, we're at the end of the Act 6, and then we'll go through 7. And then, as I'm doing Torganized Play, Blood on the Blasted Lands, I'm kind of not game mastering the other two groups in Torg. I'll be doing other playing in one group and game mastering the Palladium in a different. Doesn't mean that I'm by any means burnt out on Torg. I just need to, when I'm doing something, I need to kind of focus on that and not just have everything be Torg, 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 Game Master Torg. How Michael Roderick does it, I have no idea. That man is a machine pumping out game mastering Torg after Torg after Torg. Very much respect for that. But that's kind of what I did with Unhallowed Data. Then we can go on. I am doing Blood on the Blasted Lands on Torganized Play, Roll, Hit, Die. And we're about halfway through the first act, which is usually what I do in about 3 to 4 hours. Usually those should be 3 to 3.5 hours, depending on where we stop, how far along in the act. Normally it takes me about 2 sessions of that length to get through an act. In a mega adventure, and the Delphi missions, they're usually shorter. They're usually 3 acts or so. A first start, start, middle, end. Here it's kind of like a start, and then a few things you have to do, and then you get to the end, and then you move to the next act, and it's kind of more along 5 scenes to an act, so they tend to take a little bit longer at times, especially if they have combat. Now, I do want to say one thing that as I was writing this, that I took in is, even though these mega adventures do have to have a plot, and while I won't say they need to be railroady, I don't like railroads. The first time I experienced the railroad, I realized I didn't like it and have kept that in my head the entire time. But when people were talking about other games being not so many choices, hopefully it's presented in here that there are various choices. Now, they're not necessarily good choices. And it's not necessarily you got good choice A and bad choice B, you got a choice. No, it's a bunch of bad choices that you got to figure out how to do. But hopefully it will be seen that there are choices. You get to choose kind of which faction you're going with multiple times, not just to start off with. Do I do this or do I do this? Do I go here? Do I go here? And sometimes it's like, these certain things have to be done, all of them have to be done, but give your players a choice of which one they do first, which one they do second, which one they do third. That presents a choice instead of they have to do A first, and then they do B, and then C. It's still kind of on rails, but it's more of what your little shore leaves are doing, what your little diversions, if you're on a cruise, which excursions you're going on. You're on the ship and you got an itinerary, but when you stop at this port, you choose which of the excursions you go on. So that's kind of one of these. I try to add some politics to it. We try to add all three of the dukes, kind of how each one of them is doing things. So hopefully, when people play this, and now people are getting it, I've got it. Obviously, I did a video of my unboxing a couple of days ago. Hopefully, that people will be using this and see that it has choices and opportunities and things like that. And also, don't necessarily go official. If your group decides to go away, that Ulysses Spila decided, or all their feedback comes together and is going to determine it to be a different way, don't worry about it. You can always change things in the future. The perks, the spells, the psionics, anything like that can all be used and you can just change things. I didn't have Crenad die for a very long time. This uh the way the three-way civil war was set up finally attracted me, so I had it done much later than in it, but you could do this without even having Crenad have being disposed. You could have it as he has three underlings that he's setting against each other and do it that way. If one of them dies, introduce somebody else. You can. It's just change it, make it your own. You don't have to follow strict things. So I wanted to say that about that. When Cosms Collide, I haven't played. I've read it. The problem was I was reading it when I was taking a 3-day flight, a flight that took 3 days to go to Russia. And I was reading this in the airport and on the planes with serious jet lag and things like that. So a lot of this stuff was going over my head, blowing my mind, and things like that. It's written by Greg Gordon, who's a great game master, the person who pretty much invented Torg. Awesome, awesome guy to work with, work for. And the clear transparency, I'm not getting sponsored or paid or anything to do this. I'm just doing it because I'm a Torg fan. I just happen to be a freelancer. But one day I will sit down and I will go through this really detailed, and because things were blowing my mind, and I can see how I can make this my own. Also, my world, the Paraverse, isn't the same as the Torg Eternity official world. So there's things I change because I need to, and there's some changes that I do just because I want them to be different than official. I want that if my players have read this or come through it, that they can still go on the adventure and not be certain that things that they do will affect the world as they think. So that's another thing to make it your own, is if you have players who like this, or maybe they're co-game masters and they game master their own things, to make it different. And then the last mega adventure that Torg Eternity has so far is Relics of Power Redux, which has gotten just lots and lots of praise. When this came out, it was cool because it was like a serial. Nile Empire came out, and the first 2 acts were done, and then Isle came out, and the next 3 acts were put into it, and then Cyber Papacy came out, and everything was compiled and put into a hardback version. I thought it was going to be the last 3 PDF, or the last 2 PDF, and then the Tharcold one be the one that put it all together in hardback, but no, they just threw it into hardback themselves. This one I had a lot of fun writing my act in it, the Tharcold act, and that's because besides the core book, nothing had really been determined about Tharcold at the time that I was asked to write the Tharcold act. So I got to ask a lot of questions and figure out kind of what was going on. And even Old Torg lore really couldn't apply, because in Old Torg, when Tharcold invaded Russia, the Russia with Pan Pacifica, it was basically Nippon Tech, Kanawa, repelled them, and they came back a couple of years later in Los Angeles. So that whole thing was totally up in the air on how it could be done, and I asked a lot of questions. And in this one also, I try to keep let players do things that they wanted to do. There's a whole section where there's travel, and I wanted travel in my act to be an important part of it, because when you have Isle, you got the Isle source book, and that told you war zones and what's going on here and what's going on there and how things are here and how things are there. So you got that information. In Tharcold, you didn't have that information. So I kind of wanted it to be kind of a small transport yourself or your party through Tharcold. So I had some areas where it was in Stay just normal Stay boundaries. And then I had it in Blasted Land boundaries bounded by Stela, and then Blasted Land area. Maybe it wasn't bounded. I don't know if during that time, but I wanted to introduce those type of things and how different cities were affected or not affected by it, how different things were operating and stuff like that. And since it was a travel, and when you have travel in a book, you as the author might think, oh, this is they're going to go by train, or they're going to go by car, or they're going to go by plane, and you write that, and then the adventurers, the party decides to do something completely different. And I thought, I want them to do the train. And the reason I want to do the train, and I'll be perfectly honest, is we threw in lots of Easter eggs in this book. We did not make it so that it's just a rehash of the original Relics of Power, but we wanted to have things pop up in different ways. And one of the things in the old Relics of Power was a train ride. And so I wanted to do a train ride, and instead of it being on the Oriental Express, I wanted to be on the Trans-Siberian Railroad way. And so I wanted that, and that's kind of what I was thinking of. But I realized maybe they're going to drive. Now, driving is a bad thing in Thargold, but if you wanted to do that, this was going to happen. And by knowing how the train was going to happen, the driving then would see the results of what would happen if your group wasn't on the train. And I thought that that would be something that the players might not ever realize, but the game master would realize, that depending on the choice the players made on their transportation, their mode of transportation, different results out in the Torg world would have happened, even if it was a localized, even if it wasn't having big ramifications all over for the war. But in that central area or on that train, a people that lived because the Storm Knights were there, maybe they didn't because the Storm Knights weren't there, and they would see the importance of their actions or inactions, depending if they, and the same thing on the train. On the train, if you did this, you had a chance of this happening. If you ignored it or got off earlier, then the other thing would happen. So that's something that I was always on both this and Blood on the Blasted Land, was giving more choices. Kind of, you have to be at point A, you have to end at point B, but getting there, give lots of choices. And if the players decide to do something completely different, then hopefully a game master can use the frameworks of this and see how things went and make it so that it works their own way. So basically, that's kind of all the mega adventures. So that is something cool. I love being part of the team that did this. Very happy with it. A lot of good reviews. I will say that when everything was put together in Cyber Papacy, and then it was released, and kind of as it was going on, like when the Isle ended and the crowdfunding unlocked, three of us who were writing Acts 3, 4, and 5, and it got to where it was released, we were like, hope people like it. I hope people like it. And there were good reviews. And then when the whole thing got together, there were good reviews. We were always waiting for something big, huge negative to happen. And while people have their quibbles and little things that they don't like, I'm happily surprised that most people have liked this, and I haven't really got any feedback that there's some major problems where tons of people hate something that we wrote. So that's really cool. And kind of the same way with Blood on the Blasted Lands. When we got that done, I was very, very happy and very proud of the team, of myself, John Watson, and Brian Reeves, and what we have formed together in the adventure, and was happy that it mostly got good reviews as well. So that's one of the things that before I was a writer for Torg, and I was working at a bookstore, or a book warehouse, which I mentioned before in videos like where I'm unboxing or talking about book bindings and stuff like that. Is I worked at a book warehouse for 14 years, and we would go to universities. And I know anybody who's went to the university is probably going to hate me now, but I was one of the people that bought your books back. I was part of that buyback team at certain colleges. Um, we would say you're going to get a nickel for a book that you paid $200, just because you have to pay all these people and pay shipping and pay every person who's touched it. And that sometimes you actually got some decent money, but a lot of times people would be disappointed. But that's another thing. The point I wanted to make was, when we did that as a service to the bookstore, the university bookstore. And it's before you could order things online from Amazon super easy in those days. You sold it to your bookstore, you probably didn't sell it. But we weren't the only book warehouse. We would be invited. And the thing is if you do a good job or not do a good job, and you talk to the people there, right there, and you say, after the buyback is done, oh, how did I do? Or after any job you do, oh, how did I do? Unless you were horrible, horrible, that you were being yelled at because of the horrible job that you were doing at the time, you would probably get, oh, you did a great job. But that means little. I won't say it means nothing, but it means very little if they don't ask you back. If the next time that they need you, or they need that position to be fulfilled by somebody, if they don't ask you back, if they don't ask for your business, then you didn't do a good job as they said you did, because they were just either embarrassed or shy, or just didn't want to step on your toes or get in an argument, because it wasn't that you were so horrible, I'm going to complain about it right now. It was just that, yeah, they were okay, but maybe somebody else is better. If you actually do a good job, they will ask you back. And when I did this, I was happy because I did get asked back. So that's how I saw it. When I wrote for this, I was happy with my product. It seemed that Ulysses Spiel was happy with my product, the final version of it. And then I was asked back. So then that told me I did a good job, because if not, they wouldn't have asked me back. So that's just kind of a personal story. I like to do that every once in a while. So um, we're at 35 minutes or so I'll end here. I went through all the mega adventures. Make things your own. Read them. If you realize your group isn't going to like something, change it. You don't have to go step by step. Is this? You need to cut a scene, cut a scene. If you need to stop at the end of the second act and do some stuff and come back because you want some tension, or you want them to kind of forget about it. You want them to think that they solved everything, but in the background other things are happening. That to me is legitimate. And to me, that doesn't take away player agencies, because they did everything that they wanted, and then they are no longer paying attention. If they would tell me, hey, we want to contact through I don't have the Delphi Council, but if I was doing it officially, oh, we're going to contact through the Delphi Council. They have their own contacts in my game. We'll talk to our contacts in Cairo and see how this is going. Well, then, yes, I would do things and figure out what information they might learn, and they might realize that stuff is going on. But like I said, with the God Box in my Azteca, the party failed. They thought they won and they failed, but they never took the opportunity and the time to check back. There was like a whole 3-month time where game time, not real time, where if they would have asked about what was going on, they would have learned and they would have been able to stop it, but they didn't. And to me, that's not being an adversarial game master. That's not taking away player agency, in my opinion. That is just they weren't doing what they could have done. They were put it in the past and moved on, but that's not necessarily how a world, a living world, works. So take that or leave it as you want. Use any of the information that I gave you to enhance your own game. Again, if you don't like what I'm saying, if your group hates what I'm saying, hates my way of thinking, then don't do it that way. Realize that's the way that I did it, and you would probably like something the opposite way. So that's also a choice. So otherwise, tune in tomorrow on Roll Hit Die Twitch, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific, for the second session of Blood on the Blasted Lands. We left with the howl of a wolf. So the party, the they're they're realizing something's going to happen. So once again, I am Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorval Chan, less than guru, and until next time, I will catch you later.